Grandpa stole his first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
And welcome, America, to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. It is so great to have you along. We got some great guests today, as always. Sunny Morton is here. She did a great job at Roots Tech talking about a comparison of the major newspaper companies and what they offer. I think you're going to find it very interesting what she has to say. That's coming up in about 10 minutes. Later in the show, we're going to talk to Judy Goodman-Eichels. She has written a book about her birth father, who was killed in World War II in China while he saved 7 of his crewmen with his B-29 bomber. Yeah, it's quite a story. You're going to want to hear how she wound up going back to China and getting honored by the descendants of some of the Chinese people her father fought to protect. Right now, let's find out what's going on in the world in our Family Histoire news by checking in with David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and American Ancestors.org. Hello, David.
Hey, Fish. How's things with you?
Yep, finding all kinds of things, not only for myself, but for many others. The last few weeks, it's been crazy and a lot of fun, and it's great to change people's lives.
It really is. And I'll tell you, one change, well, it doesn't really affect anybody who's living, but the overall story of Leonardo da Vinci has been changed. A document dating back to 1452, signed by his father, essentially is the emancipation of his mother. Now, Fish, history has always thought that his mother was a Tuscan peasant. Not so much. She appears to be an enslaved person from the Caucasus who was then the love interest of Da Vinci's father. And, of course, they had Leonardo. So history has changed. Whoever thought all the paint was dry on that story.
Yeah, right. Research has been going on for decades. And so that's a fascinating new thing I know we're going to be hearing a lot about.
Well, you know, enslavement is something that deals with many of the continents, and specifically here in North America, there's been a lot of push in recent decades to research African Americans. And Norfolk State University graduate Miss Williams has actually been involved in a project called Sold Downriver. It's a website, partnership between local historical societies and students to identify over 21,000 enslaved persons that came from Norfolk, Virginia.
What a great project. And hopefully we're going to have some people who can plug into that database.
Exactly. So you can go to solddownriver.com to learn more. And I have some exciting news from Boston. NEHGS and American Ancestors has partnered with the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum for the Boston Tea Party Descendants Program. Yeah, so if you have an ancestor who was part of the Boston Tea Party, you can now join. But even if you're not descended from one, you might have an ancestor who lived in Boston in 1773 and be considered an eyewitness to that history, or you can even be a co-conspirator, someone who is a researcher, educator, and just a general public who want to support the program.
That's
so more
interesting.
details on that coming up soon.
Yeah, that's really fun. You know, the funny thing about that is there's so many names associated with the Boston Tea Party, people who claimed to have been part of it, you know, among those who dressed up in Native American garb to hide their identities. But so many of them were, I think, were fraudulent, don't you?
Well, you know, there's a lot of records that are around from the 18th century, and it's a matter of, you know, scouring through the documents, which our researchers have done in conjunction with the Boston Tea Party Museum. So I think we get the list narrowed down pretty well.
Really?
And of course, there's always margin for error and room for correction.
My wife had one ancestor from Virginia who had claimed to be in the Boston Tea Party, and I thought, no, I think that's a long way from home.
Exactly. It's a little bit of a walk.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about a walk, let's walk a little further north over the Canadian border, and in conjunction with Family Search and Ancestry.com, as of June 1st this year, we will now have the 1931 Census of Canada.
Yes, and you are part Canadian, are you not?
Yes, I have both American and Canadian heritage, so I am a citizen of both countries. And I am thinking of who would I find? I have at least 2 great-grandfathers, a couple step-great-grandmothers, and a whole lot of great-uncles and cousins that are just waiting to be uncovered as of June. So you know what I'll be doing the first week of that month.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things I always love is when there's genealogy and DNA of, well, not just humans. In the New York Times recently, the DNA of the donkey family tree, and I don't mean the one from Shrek. This is a research of over 207 modern donkeys in 31 countries and skeletons going back as early as 4,500 years ago. They have found out that the earliest form of human-based transportation, domesticated donkeys, go back to 5,000 years ago when herders in the Horn of Africa, which is now Kenya, began to tame these wild beasts.
So this kind of ties in with the horses story we had last week. It was around the same time, right?
Exactly.
The DNA of a donkey.
Well, you know, I get some sad news. Our good friend Jack Holder, we had on the show, as you know, has passed away at 101, a Pearl Harbor survivor, and narrowly died over 81 years ago.
Boy, he had a narrow escape at Pearl Harbor. In fact, the first bomb that dropped in World War II was less than a football field away from him, and then he was strafed by a Japanese fighter, and he was so close to the plane he could actually see the grinning face of the Japanese pilot. Unbelievable. Jack's going to be missed, and you know what? We're going to rerun our interview we did with him in 2021 as he personally describes his experience at Pearl Harbor. We'll have that for you next week. We're going to miss Jack Holder.
Well, you know, he's not the last of the Pearl Harbor survivors. Our friend Lou Conter and Ken Potts and my friend Horace Hamilton, they're still alive and well. Some news stories said he was the last, but we still have a bunch of our guys still around.
Amazing.
41.
A few dozen, right?
At least.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's all I have from Beantown this week, but don't forget, at AmericanAncestors.org, we'd love to have you join, and if you use the coupon code EXTREME, you'll save $20 off a membership.
Very nice, David. All right, we'll catch you at the back end of the show as we do another round of Ask Us Anything. And coming up, we're going to talk to Sunny Morton, talking about newspaper sites. What do they bring to us? She does a great comparison. This was a presentation she did at Roots Tech. Plus, later in the show, Judy Goodman-Eichels is going to talk about her father, who was shot down in World War II, but saved 7 of his crewmen in the process. Great stories coming up when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Hi, Genies. Fisher here, and I hear from so many of you all the time that I love all those family stories on Extreme Genes. Where can I find ancestor stories like those? The best answer? Digitized newspapers. And nobody has more digitized newspaper pages than newspapers.com. Newspapers.com has well over 800 million searchable pages from the United States and countries all over the world. Find those valuable obituaries and marriage accounts, often with photographs. Read your ancestors' funny stories, sad stories, and sometimes shocking stories. It was from newspapers.com that I learned about how my grandfather rescued a boy from a flooded lake during World War II. In another account, I learned that my wife's ancestor ran off with the wife of a farmhand and stole over $20,000 in the process. Newspapers.com is like that box of chocolates we always hear about. You never know what you're going to get. What will you find? Sign up now at newspapers.com.
Are you stuck in your genealogy research? Have you hit a brick wall and just can't find a way through? Or maybe you are just getting started and don't know where to begin. The experts at Legacy Tree Genealogists have helped clients in every state and virtually every country in the world to find their missing ancestors and complete their family tree. There is nothing more rewarding than the moment you make a connection and find the missing link to your relatives. And Legacy Tree has been making those connections for clients for over 18 years. Learn more at legacytree.com. Whether you are a beginning researcher or you've been immersed in genealogy for decades, brick walls happen. But with the Legacy Tree network of on-site researchers around the world, you can reach that aha moment where it all comes together and the missing pieces make sense. Learn more about how to work with Legacy Tree Genealogists at legacytree.com. Put your family history in our hands. We do the work, you enjoy the discoveries. Get started at legacytree.com. Visit us online at legacytree.com.
Hey, Genies. As we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. And welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your radio Roots sleuth, and it was so nice to be back live at Roots Tech at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, Utah here a few weeks ago. And to see great presentations like the one from my next guest, Sonny Morton, great professional genealogist and blogger and writer. And of course, full disclosure, of course, newspapers.com is one of our sponsors. But Sonny did a great cross-site comparison from smallest to largest, who does what. And Sonny, welcome back to the show. It is great to have you. It was a great presentation.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You covered 5 sites. 2 of them are free, and the other 3, of course, are for pay. But the benefits of newspapers, to me, are just astounding, because you can find things there, certainly secrets there, stories there, that really no other type of record can reveal.
That's absolutely true. They really were the social media of our ancestors' day. That's where all the local conversations happened. And that's where you're going to learn about anything that anybody was talking about.
You know, it's funny you say that, because you think about, for instance, letters to the editor that you can go through and see what people's opinions were. That was very much like social media today. And there were also little articles about so-and-so is off visiting their family in California. They'll be back in 2 weeks.
I found a lot of those.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that that are very similar to what we do today on a very localized scale, and certainly a lot more polite.
Yes, this is true. Sometimes, not always.
So let's talk about the different sites and talk about some of the pluses and minuses.
Well, I started by talking about 2 of our free websites, as you mentioned, both Chronicling America and Fulton History. And, they are worth talking about. Between the 2 of them, they've got millions and millions of newspaper pages. They're kind of like a free gateway drug for any of us.
That's a good way to describe it. Yes.
Right. To get started with newspaper research and see what kinds of things are out there. I think probably most of your listeners are most familiar with Chronicling America, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I would think so. It's been around the longest, and the government started out with the promise of giving us digitized newspapers for everything in the history of the country, and then it kind of stopped.
Well, it still made it to about 20 million digitized newspaper pages that we can search for free. And of course, an enormous inventory of all the newspapers that have been published in the United States clear back when. So it is a really valuable place, and it's a great starting place because it's free.
Sure, absolutely.
And something that I like about Chronicling America is that because it's a federally funded project, it has scope nationally. So there's content for every state.
Well, and the nice thing is, too, because it is a federal government site, all that content you can reproduce.
Absolutely. So it's all free of copyright restrictions. That's what's on Chronicling America. And the other free website that we want to talk about, Fulton History, is stuff that is not currently protected by copyright.
Fulton History is a remarkable place done by one guy in his retirement. How many pages are they up to now, Sonny?
51 million. So that if Chronicling America has 20 million, and they're a federally funded project, and Fulton History has 51 million, 2.5 times the content from one guy.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just his passion project, and it's free, but it's really clunky to search. But I will tell you that I had a breakthrough there where I found the marriage record of my third great-grandparents, because in an obscure upstate New York newspaper in 1886 that this guy digitized, they went through all the marriages performed by a minister in that area from the 18 teens and 1820s. And there were the names of my people, and I finally obtained the maiden name of my third great-grandmother as a result of that. And those lines went way back as a result of the benefit from that newspaper.
That's a great find. And that's just the kind of thing that you might find in an obscure newspaper, a small town paper. And that you're saying that this was published several years later.
Yes.
That's the other thing.
60 years later. Yeah.
Yeah. So we might find the coverage that we're looking for, but it's not going to be in the right place or maybe the right time.
Well, sometimes newspapers will say 20 years ago today, and they'll write some little local news story, or 50 years ago today, and you can find your people's names in those, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, you mentioned that was a New York discovery, right?
Yes. Upstate New York.
That doesn't surprise me at all, because that's Fulton's real strength is, I think, 950 or so of its titles are newspapers from New York. So a lot of its coverage is going to be New York based, but they do have a lot of other states. They don't cover all 50 like Chronicling America does. So it's a little more hit or miss, but you're going to really find some great surprising stuff there. Yeah,
it's free, but it's really hard to search.
It is. It's challenging.
Okay, on to the next ones.
All right. Well, the other three that I compared are our subscription websites that are real strong here in the United States: Genealogy Bank, Newspaper Archive, and newspapers.com. So I'm guessing you're pretty familiar with those sites, too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I found some really amazing things, takeaways for each of these sites, too. And I think one of the things that people most want to know is, are they going to have the papers that I want from my family's time and place?
Yes.
So what I wanted to know is whether I could answer that question without being a subscriber. And you can. You can search each of these sites by their archive to see what they've got for each individual city or locale and their time periods, so that you'll know before you subscribe if they've got the kind of coverage you want.
Right, exactly, because you're not only covering the place, but the time period as well. And there are a lot of places that cover the same large cities, for instance, but they don't necessarily have the same time period.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And one of the other things that I found is that they do kind of vary in terms of their time period strengths. Some of them might have better coverage of earlier decades in the United States history, and some of them are a lot stronger on more recent coverage. They kind of skew that direction. Now, both of those are really valuable, and I would almost argue that it's the content for the last 95 years or so that's still in copyright that we can only find at these premium websites that might be the most meaningful to us, because those are our lifetimes, our parents, our grandparents, sometimes the later lives of our great-grandparents, depending on how old you are.
And they had to pay for those in copyright papers, so we have to pay them, obviously.
Yeah, and that's what makes it a premium resource. That's why we have to pay something. But I'll give you my favorite tip from this, Scott, for your listeners.
Okay.
And this is that each of them has a monthly access available. So if you're interested in just checking it out, for about $20 a month for each of these, you could go in and just spend a month getting to know the site and see if you think it's worth it.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
And if you aren't willing or able to put that $20 a month into your budget for that, you can also go to your favorite library and ask if they have the library editions of each of these. The title of the database is going to be a little bit different, but you can ask your favorite local library what collections they have, and you can search those for free.
Yeah, that's right. Just go to the library. Simple enough. And there's different coverage on each of these. I love that Newspaper Archive covers a lot of the smaller papers out in the country.
Yeah, for sure. So each of them does have a little bit different collection priorities and the way that they go about getting their content, which was really interesting to learn too, because their priorities and the way they get their contracts really affects the kind of things that end up on their site.
Yeah.
Genealogy Bank has published some of its obituary indexes on Family Search, which is free. And you might have seen some of your own hints come up or search results come up in those Genealogy Bank collections. And then over on Ancestry.com, their sister company is newspapers.com, and Newspapers publishes its enormous indexes over on Ancestry. So you can get some teaser content both places. And boy, if you consistently find that your family is appearing in some of that teaser content, that's a real hint that you should be exploring these sites on the monthly plan or on the library plan for free or whatever it is you can do. I would make the effort to get over and check it out.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. You know, this is a thing about newspapers. It's called journalism, right? And it comes from the word journal, which means we're keeping track of things that happen day to day within the lives of the people we knew and loved. Things that people might not even remember. Maybe some things that they do. I just was helping somebody here recently, just a few days ago, and discovered that a relative had 4 children killed in a house fire. And just as a result of the straight research and finding a death certificate that described the situation. And then when we went to the newspaper coverage of the story, there were 3 others. And it was just such a shocking thing. It's funny how those things kind of hit you like they just happened today sometimes, you know?
For sure. You know, we're used to seeing some of these obituary indexes or vital records indexes, but something really powerful that newspapers.com is doing is they're starting to create indexes for what they call stories and events. So the rest of the newspaper, not just the obituary section, they're creating enormous indexes with maybe over 1 billion entries just for the state of California.
Well,
500 million just for the state of Tennessee or Ohio.
Isn't that crazy?
Right? You're going to start finding more of the stories like what you're talking about, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the number of pages go for these sites, what are we looking at?
All right. Well, I already gave you a little bit of a breakdown on our free sites. Genealogy Bank doesn't release the number of pages on its site, but the number of titles is fairly comparable with Newspaper Archive. Doesn't mean it's exactly the same amount of pages, but Newspaper Archive has about 280 million pages on the site. So just let that sink in a little bit.
That's a lot, yes.
And then over at newspapers.com, their top tier subscription with the most licensed content is an order of magnitude above that, over 800 million pages.
So we're talking like 4 times?
Yeah, nearly.
That's unbelievable. You know, we're out of time, Sonny. That is a great comparison, and it's important to know that there are places to find things that are free, even paid things that are available for free, and that you can find stories and surprises so easily. People are always asking, where do you get these stories? A lot of it comes from newspapers. Thanks so much, Sonny, for coming on.
Thank you, Scott.
And coming up next, I'll be talking to a woman who found out about her birth father and his heroics in World War II by going back to China, where he was honored. You'll want to hear the story coming up next in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Hey, welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. I am Fisher, and my next guest, wow, what a story she has to tell. She has written it in a book that you can find online. It's called Death in Wartime China, A Daughter's Discovery. She is Judy Goodman Eichels, and she lost her dad back in 1944 in a B-24 Liberator bomber. Judy, welcome to Extreme Genes. It's great to have you. Tell us how you found out about this story. Did you grow up knowing it the whole time?
Well, thank you very much, Scott. Happy to tell this story. Of course, I knew that my birth father had died in World War II, and I knew that he had died in China. But as a little girl growing up in Texas, I didn't have very much ability to do research on it. It seemed so far away.
Sure.
And life went on. My mother remarried. I had a wonderful adopted father. And although I thought about my birth father, Bill Wallace, I didn't ever do any research. It all came together for me when in 2015, I was contacted just out of the blue, as we sometimes are these days because of online things, by an American researcher who had been living in China for more than 20 years, Dr. Patrick Lucas, who had run across the story of my father's heroism in China, that he saved his entire B-24 crew but lost his own life in action when the United States was defending China against the Japanese in World War II.
Wow.
And he was wanting to find some family member to provide pictures or more detail that he could use on a website that he was building to honor these American servicemen. And he had been very frustrated because he could never find anyone related to Bill Wallace. Part of that is explained by the fact that I was adopted, Bill was an only child, and so forth.
Name changes.
Correct. So after he had been looking for about 10 years, in frustration, he decided that the best thing to do would be to build a memorial for Bill. He got together some Chinese villagers from the little mountain village where Bill died, some American exchange students, and together they raised some money and put a beautiful monument there, which is not small. It's about 4 feet tall, limestone block that in English and in Chinese honors the friendship between China and the United States and the hope for peace. And there's Bill's name written. And I saw this online and I thought, well, good grief. Here's a memorial dedicated to my birth father, someplace in southern China. I have to go see it.
Wow.
So in 2016, my late husband and I made that long trip, and we were greeted. I didn't know what to expect.
Oh, I bet you were greeted like heroes.
We were greeted like visiting royalty, but it wasn't just me. The memories and the reverence that people have for the Flying Tigers, the American airmen who defended that part of China during the war, are really still alive and well there. Flying Tigers is a name that appears everywhere.
Sure.
There's a security company that's called the Flying Tigers, and there's a community organization that welcomed us. As well, there is a wing of the museum there in Kunming, China, which is dedicated to the Flying Tigers, and where I found my father's name. So it was a real journey for me, and I just relished the opportunity not only to learn more about his role in the war and the role of the United States in the war, but also to reconnect with a person who gave me my life, even when he lost his own to defend the country. So it's been quite a journey.
So as an adoptee, was this kind of a conflict for you over the years? Because you obviously had a really great upbringing with your stepfather. Or was he your adoptive father?
No, he adopted me.
Okay.
And changed my name. I can still remember when that happened. I thought it was very, very fancy, very, a little girl to get a new name, And of course, my adopted father and mother never had any other children. And I was Ernestine and Bill's only child. So I was the little apple of everybody's eye there in Dallas, Texas. So with 3 sets of grandparents and a multitude of really wonderful Goodman cousins, I grew up. And it's not so much that there was a conflict, but when you're a little child, as I write in my book, even though I didn't know the meaning of the word taboo, I very well understood that when I brought up certain things, people got sad. It made them sad to think about Bill. It made them sad to feel his loss. So I just avoided it.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you made this connection over in China and you went over and saw that monument, did he change from just being, oh, there's the birth father, to being, oh, that was my dad?
Actually, in some very profound way, it did change. I had always had a curiosity about what life was like in his final days. Where was he? What did the terrain look like? What were the people like? And as I began to think about those things and answer those questions for myself and see for myself, his personality and his image really came into high relief for me.
Had to be a change.
There was a change. I reread all the letters that Mother had saved that they had exchanged during the war. I went back and I looked at his high school records. I read everything I could find that he ever wrote. He loved to write poetry, especially to my mother.
Oh.
And being an amateur poet myself, I really found a lot in common with that aspect of his personality. I learned that, again, I was reminded that he loved music and played the piano and sang in the school choir. I did all of those things. So in some ways, my life mirrored his, even though at the time I wasn't thinking about it in that way.
Mm. Well, I think just from my experience in dealing with a lot of people who've grown up with people other than their birth parents, there is some point at which you have to get past that sense of, oh, I'm betraying the ones who raised me, to embrace the ones who gave me life.
Yes. And my adopted father was so open and welcoming, that whole Goodman family. And in my own case, I think it was more the sadness and the grief of my Wallace grandparents that kind of held things back. Sure. Because they were always at our house. My adopted father really, back in the day when everyone, men bought flowers for everyone on Mother's Day, he always included all of my grandmothers. So there was a real sense of inclusion there, but there was always that little question. What would life have been like had he come home? Well, it would have been entirely different for a lot of people. But look what happened. He saved 7 crew members in losing his own life. My question to you is, are you aware of any of the families that he impacted through his actions? I know their names, and the American researcher, Pat Lucas, was able to talk with one survivor back in the early 2000s. Wow. But not all of the men who survived on June 10th, 1944, went on to survive the entire war. And all of them are gone now. Sure. Well, nonetheless, it would be interesting to know what has resulted, especially with the survivor. I mean, he probably went on to have his own family and all that wouldn't have happened were it not for your father. Well, maybe you can help me find them. Oh, boy, here we go. Another project. Another project. She is Judy Goodman Eichel. She is the author of the book Death in Wartime China, A Daughter's Discovery. Judy, it has been a joy to talk to you. What an incredible story. And congratulations on your journey. These are just the things that change our lives, right? To learn about our origins and to make sure that our people's stories survive. That's it. You got it. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. You bet. Of course, we can get the book anywhere. It's on Amazon and all throughout the internet. Thanks so much, Judy. And coming up next, another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show in 3 minutes.
Are you stuck in your genealogy research? Have you hit a brick wall and just can't find a way through? Or maybe you are just getting started and don't know where to begin. The experts at Legacy Tree Genealogists have helped clients in every state and virtually every country in the world to find their missing ancestors and complete their family tree. There is nothing more rewarding than the moment you make a connection and find the missing link to your relatives. And Legacy Tree has been making those connections for clients for over 18 years. Learn more at legacytree.com. Whether you are a beginning researcher or you've been immersed in genealogy for decades, brick walls happen. But with the Legacy Tree network of on-site researchers around the world, you can reach that aha moment where it all comes together and the missing pieces make sense. Learn more about how to work with Legacy Tree Genealogists at legacytree.com. Put your family history in our hands. We do the work, you enjoy the discoveries. Get started at legacytree.com. Visit us online at legacytree.com.
Hi, Genies. Fisher here, and I hear from so many of you all the time that I love all those family stories on Extreme Genes. Where can I find ancestor stories like those? The best answer? Digitized newspapers. And nobody has more digitized newspaper pages than newspapers.com. Newspapers.com has well over 800 million searchable pages from the United States and countries all over the world. Find those valuable obituaries and marriage accounts, often with photographs. Read your ancestors' funny stories, sad stories, and sometimes shocking stories. It was from newspapers.com that I learned about how my grandfather rescued a boy from a flooded lake during World War II. In another account, I learned that my wife's ancestor ran off with the wife of a farmhand and stole over $20,000 in the process. Newspapers.com is like that box of chocolates we always hear about. You never know what you're going to get. What will you find? Sign up now at newspapers.com. Hey, Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow Genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. All right, this is one of my favorite segments on the show each week. It is Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. David Allen Lambert is back in Boston from the New England Historic Genealogical Society at AmericanAncestors.org. David, our question comes from Lillian Frankel in Lake Worth, Florida. And she says, "Hi, guys. I have a limited membership to Ancestry.com and have seen a hint to one of my French ancestors to a site called GenieNet. Is it worth getting a subscription there? What might I find? Thank you." First of all, it's GenieNet, right, David?
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's important to know that. And they were actually recently bought by Ancestry.com, which is why you're seeing some of the hints there. But you don't actually have to sign up for GenieNet. But if you got a full subscription to Ancestry, you would have access to that material.
And, Ancestry has acquired some companies that had great material on it standalone, but it's nice to get them all under the same umbrella.
Yes.
I think I met GenieNet reps Roots Tech back maybe a few years ago.
Yeah.
First time. I think that's when they came out.
Well, I'll tell you this. They have the work on there of many French researchers and just people like us Americans who like to do the same thing. And they are very thorough. They do a really good job at documenting where they find their material. They put in stories in there as well. And just the other day, I had a friend who was leaving in 2 days to go to Europe, and she wanted to find some place to visit over there. And so we went on to Ancestry and looked at her earliest ancestor on her name line, which went back to 1851 in Germany. But as it turned out, the family was actually French. And when we plugged that in, we found a GenieNet link, and it took her back 6 generations along the German and French border. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And her head exploded. And so it was great.
Not literally,
fun.
I hope.
No. And what was interesting, though, is somebody posted a legend surrounding this earliest name line ancestor of hers. And the story is that he was out herding oxen or cows or something. One of them got lost, and he was terrified he was going to be punished by whoever he was responsible to. And he ran off into the woods, and he couldn't find it. He heard a voice. And it said, "Go back home, you will find the calf. But when you do, make sure you pay your devotion to the Virgin Mary." And so he went back home and he found the calf or the oxen or whatever it was and kind of forgot about the promise that he had made. And then when he went to go off to war a few years later, he remembered the promise and he put up a little Virgin Mary in the hollow of a tree. And over time, this became a sacred place in this village, and they actually built a Catholic church there. And that Catholic church remains in that place to this very day. And so now she just left actually a few hours ago on this trip, and she is planning on spending at least a week in that village. And I told her, I think, a town that small, she had kind of an unusual maiden name, Fischer. I told her, I said, you're probably going to be received as a hero there because your ancestor was considered the founder of that particular church. And this whole thing came across because of GenieNet being tied onto Ancestry. And I myself have had connections there. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago about the Du Bois family of upstate New York. There was always all kinds of information, wrong information about the ancestry of Louis Du Bois and Jacques Du Bois. But the folks over in France, they had the records, they solved it, and now we're just having the problem, David, as you can imagine, of just trying to correct the past mistakes and keep them corrected. Because when you deal with any wiki tree, people want to go back and say, oh, it was in this book. But of course, when the book's wrong, then what do, right?
That is very true.
Yeah.
I try to have a conversation with somebody about how you cannot rely on a 1860s genealogy that doesn't have a footnote in it when you're trying to join the Mayflower Society.
Right. Exactly. So great question, Lillian. Hopefully that will help you out. And we've got another question coming up next when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, welcome back for our final segment this week on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fish here, David over there in Boston. And David, our next question comes from Holly Rose Hall in Edmond, Oklahoma. And she says, guys, I recently discovered in the 1930 census that my ancestor had some kind of military experience, but not the Civil War or World War I. It says spam. Can you tell me what spam meant back then?
Well, it's not that delicious meat in a can
No.
Some veterans would have eaten. It actually refers to SP for Spanish, AM for American, for the Spanish-American War. I don't have any ancestors who fought in that war. Do you?
No,
Fish?
no,
Okay.
Not one.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because it really only went on for a little more than 3 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days between April and August of 1898. And of course, we always remember the term "remember the Maine" when the USS Maine exploded in Havana, Cuba. Of course, you've probably heard of the Rough Riders at San Juan Hill with Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, a lot of activity in a very short amount of time. A lot of what we know about that war is also combined with the Spanish-American War and the Philippine insurrection. And, of course, that has Dewey and the attacks in the Philippines. And basically, it stopped the Spanish possession of a lot of places in the Caribbean. The annexation of Hawaii occurred in 1898 at the start of the war. So it's a fascinating time, but there are records. Now, the Spanish-American War veteran pensions, which you're going to get all the post-life, are already indexed online, but you're not going to find it under Spanish-American War. You're going to find it in the database on Ancestry called Civil War Pension Index.
Wait. Civil War Pension Index has the Spanish-American War guys too?
Covers 1861 to 1934. On the card, it will be stamped in the upper right-hand corner. Usually says War with Spain. So that would be one place to check. And, of course, those records are still at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. So are the service records for Spanish-American War veterans. So you have to go through the records in person at NARA, but you can order them online. A pension right now is $80 from the National Archives for the first 100 pages. A service record is $30, and that usually doesn't take that many documents in it. So as you move through the records, what else can you look for? There may be a gravestone for your ancestor in the Spanish-American War.
Okay.
They may have belonged to one of the organizations for the soldiers. I mean, the Spanish-American War veterans. There may be a medal in your family's possession or a photograph. You may even find documents associated with the pension file that they may have applied for, like the possession of the soldier's certificate that they received. Looking at newspapers, I mean, the 1890s, put in your ancestor in 1898 and see if he comes up.
Interesting.
He may have been in the service in 1900. He may have stayed with it. And then you'll find U.S. military installations, be it a fort or a vessel, that they may connect him in the Army, the Navy, the Marines, etc. So you can find a bunch of things online.
So, David, going back to NARA, though, I mean, I haven't spoken to anybody in a while who's tried to order anything out of there. How long is it taking to get any documents right now? Do you know?
The last time I heard it was a few months.
Okay.
I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks myself, so I was hoping that maybe you had a Spanish-American War veteran you didn't look up. I was going to get you a little present before your birthday. That's a great question, and I think I might go have some Spam for supper now.
I think you might. All right, David, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for the question, Holly Rose, and thank you for listening to the show this week. Of course, thanks also to Sonny Morton to come on and talk about the various newspaper sites in a comparison, and to Judy Goodman-Eichels for talking about her father who lost his life saving 7 of his crewmen in World War II. If you missed any of the show and you want to catch it again, of course, listen to the podcast. You can find it on Apple Media, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, ExtremeGenes.com, and Spotify. Talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.